Hello, everyone. We are continuing our series of the Rabbi that forgot Sefira, and today, what do the Poskim say about it? And there's basically 4 points of view, and I'm going to say them briefly. The first point of view is based on a Rashi regarding the famous Mishnah at the beginning of Masechet Megillah that says that if you live in a village that's far away from anywhere that can have a Megillah reading on Purim itself, you can read it a few days before Purim. Now, who read the Megillah? Says Rashi, that one of the people in the city was the one that read the Megillah. Namely, he doesn't live in this village. He has no reason himself to read the Megillah early, but he can read it on behalf of someone else. Based on this, Ratzi Pesach Frank says that when it comes to mitzvot, we have an ironclad rule that we can fulfill the obligation for someone else because all Israel are guarantors to everyone. Namely, Yotza Motzi. If you already fulfilled your obligation, you can fulfill it on behalf of someone else. And then he quotes the brisker Rav of old, namely the Beit HaLevi. That exactly what we suggested, that's what he did. He forgot Sefira one night. He didn't want everyone to know. So he said, and I quote, Bikesh me'achata mitpalelim imo shelo yivarech la'atzmo, ela shehu yivarech k'shesliach tzibur v'yotzi b'birkato. He asked one of the guys, stand next to me, don't make the bracha, I'll make it on your behalf. You say Amen, and this way I can make the bracha in public. He quotes a ritva that's not in his Perush on the Gemara, but in Hilchot Brachot, that says that this is true even regarding someone living in Yerushalayim that fulfills his day of Purim a day later than the one living in Tel Aviv. He can read the Megillah for the one in Tel Aviv a day earlier. Even though his time of reading the Megillah didn't come yet. And therefore, he basically assumes that the person, namely the rabbi, is obligated in Sefira. The din of Arvut of all Israel is guarantors to each other, is, and I quote, Shuv have bar chiyuva, the klalahu, the kol chiyuv mitzvah gorer chalav, gam chiyuv arut b'al chaviro. Maybe you're not obligated, but the minute your friend is obligated, you become obligated again. And therefore he says, the famous Yerushalmi that says that someone in Yerushalayim cannot fulfill the mitzvah of Megillah for someone in Tel Aviv, that's the Yerushalmi. But the Rambam didn't mention it, probably because the Yerushalmi never mentions this law of all Israel are guarantees to each other. But since our Babli does, and since our Babli is the one we Poskim like, at the end of the day, even if you're not obligated in Sefira anymore, according to the Bahag, you can make the bracha on behalf of someone else. The Shayarei Knesset HaGedola, Rabbi Ben Abisti, actually says that some of the older rabbis in Saloniki basically suggested this. Get a guy who didn't count yet, but is obligated in the bracha, tell him to stand next to you, then the rabbi can make the bracha. Opinion number 2 is the Turei Even. Actually, the rabbi cannot make the bracha on behalf of someone else unless the guy making the bracha says it along with him. In the words of the Mishnah of Sukkah, Mishaya Evedo Ishau Katan, 3 people that are not obligated in Hallel, Makrinoto Neacharehem, they can say the Hallel and he can repeat it. And therefore the Turei Even comes along and says that when the villages used to read Megillah early and someone from the city would come to read for them, that was in a situation where, and I quote, B'nei Kfarim Onim Acharav Mashahu Omer, that can work here too. Namely, the rabbi will say the bracha, and the person that didn't say the bracha will say it along with him. There's only one problem. The one that didn't say the bracha yet and is obligated in it doesn't need the rabbi to say the bracha for him. And therefore, for the rabbi, it would be a bracha levatala. And therefore, I'm not so sure this idea would work. The third opinion is that he can't. The Tosfos says that based on the Yerushalmi, someone from Yerushalayim who's celebrating Purim a day later cannot read the Megillah for someone in Tel Aviv who's celebrating Purim a day earlier. Why? Because he's not obligated in that Megillah reading that day. In the words of the Yerushalmi, Kol she'ino mechuyav badavar, eino motzi et harabim yedei chovatam. So based on this, the Tosfot in Yevamot says that a person who's not obligated cannot fulfill the obligation for you, and that's exactly the opinion of the Pri Chadash on our question. He says that according to the Bahag, Kol Shalom Ana Balayla, Shuv Hifsid Hasfira. If you didn't count one night, you are no longer obligated in the mitzvah. It's not that you're obligated and out of deference to the Bahag, you don't make the bracha, but rather you are not obligated at all. And since you're not obligated, you cannot fulfill the obligation on behalf of someone else. And indeed, this is the position of the Knesset Hagdolah himself, even though the holy old rabbis from Saloniki said what they said. He said, "Be'enai eino ra'azo nechona." In my opinion, this is not a proper psak halacha. Why? And listen to his reason. Because if this was such a usable and efficient solution, the Poskim would have said it. But no one suggested it before the old rabbis of Saloniki. And therefore, he thought originally to follow them. But then he sat down and he said, at the end of the day, these people, the rabbi is not obligated in the mitzvah, and therefore he cannot fulfill the obligation on behalf of someone else with this trick. The Kaf HaChaim actually paskins this way, and therefore we have a machlokas. If you all agree the rabbi is not obligated at all, according to the Bahag, can he still say the bracha on behalf of someone else? Because the din of Arvot, the din of all Israel guarantees to each other, will kick in, and now he becomes obligated again. Or no, he's not obligated, and he remains non-obligated. In other words, do we paskin like the Yerushalmi that says a Yerushalmiite cannot fulfill the obligation for a Tel Avivite? Or do we paskin like the Bavli that says, no, in Arvut, the law of all Israel guarantees to each other, actually allows you to do it on behalf of someone else? The fourth opinion is very fascinating, and that's the Shevet HaLevi. Rav Levi Vosner, who lived in the 20th century, says, B'mkom atchak, you can rely on the Rishonim that say he's obligated even though he missed one night, and that every night it's its own mitzvah. And he says, what's pushing me in this direction is, and I quote, the ikar kvod Torah, kvod tzibor, efshar lismoch hazeh. Because if not, the rabbi will be embarrassed. And the Shach indeed paskins in his famous essay about paskening halacha, the b'sha'at atchak b'derabanan, efshar lismoch al da'at yachid. That in a rabbinic law, and Sefira today is rabbinic without the Korban HaOmer, you can rely on even a minority view. And in this case, it's not minority, it's Rabbi, the Rosh, and the Ri. So we basically have four opinions. Opinion number one is not relevant here, and that is that the rabbi will say the bracha and you repeat after him. That's only, in my opinion, when the person doesn't know how to make the bracha himself. Opinion number two is that even though the rabbi is not obligated, since all Israel are guarantees to each other, he can do it on behalf of someone else. And the third opinion is he's not obligated, as the Yerushalmi says, regarding the Yerushalmiite for the Tel Avivite on Purim, and therefore he can't fulfill it on behalf of someone else. And the fourth opinion is, yes, rely on the Rishonim that say every night it's its own mitzvah, and let him do it, because if not, he'll be embarrassed in public.
That's